So thank you so much for everyone that's jumping on live. Say, hey, if you're live, if you're catching the recording of it, just feel free to drop in the comments. I just wanted to share something that has been on my heart because it's a brand new year and I am like you, flooded with so much information about health on social media. And that made me really say, as much great information as there is out there, there's also unhelpful information, and there's also information that just is not filled with nuance. So I wanted to share with you three things to consider, three things that I hope will be non-negotiables for you as you're trying to navigate and determine who I should follow, what should I do, how can I improve my health, and maybe where you could take a few steps back. So the first thing that I really want to encourage people to consider is that context influences how we are going to be able to support our health. And what I mean by that is there's different things that we can consider for ourselves. We may have different socioeconomic status than other people. We may have different access to healthcare. We may have different lived experiences and spaces that we're in. So therefore, if someone is telling you that you need to eat this way, you need to exercise this much, you need to get this much sleep, you need to avoid these things, those aren't necessarily advice that's unhelpful, but it may not necessarily be relevant to your experience. Let's give you an example. So if you are someone who was a patient like me with rheumatoid arthritis and Sjogren's syndrome, yes, there's different things that people often recommend for me to do, but there's also the practicality of being somebody who sometimes has different fluctuations when it comes to my energy levels. So yeah, even though people are often like, Tamisha, you'd be great at CrossFit. I'm like, I could do that, but I also would exert myself into a point that I may not be able to easily recover for it. So I might want to choose something more gentler, whether that's yoga, whether that's walking on a trail with my dog, whether that's swimming. That's just an example. You might be someone who wants to make different dietary changes. And while there's lots of different information out there, maybe you have different food intolerances or sensitivities. So while someone's telling you to eat this specific thing, it doesn't really work for your diet. Maybe it doesn't work for your access. Maybe you're like, you're telling me to eat everything organic. I live in a place where a lot of things get imported because I have been there before, where I lived in a country where most of our food got imported to us. So like everything was frozen. So I was like, I wasn't getting that much fresh foods, but that didn't make the food any less nourishing. I knew how to find more nourishing options. But the point is just think about the context and don't put yourself into a bubble thinking if I can't do it this one way, then I'm not going to do it at all, because the all or nothing mentality often is what pushes us to not even take a chance and not really think of creative ways that we can really support our health that makes more sense for us. So that's number one. Think about the context of whatever advice you're getting. Two, care. Care really has to be collaborative. So when I think about care, yes, I am talking about from like a patient provider client provider standpoint, but I'm also thinking about even when you're creating a plan with like maybe your therapist or your personal trainer or your yoga instructor. It's also thinking about how can you collaborate on this practice and this process so that's more applicable to you. So for me, collaboration, in the past has looked like when I first got diagnosed, I worked with my providers, yes, but I worked with my NDs, my rheumatologist, my four at the time ophthalmologist, but I also had a health coach that I was working with. And I said, hey, I want to implement more, dietary and lifestyle changes. So even though that was very important to me, my healthcare team needed to be on board with that. They were like, well, we still want you to take medication, which I still did. But I also was like, but I want to also do these dietary changes. I need your support in being able to do this. So being able to have those conversations with them, navigate those and have them keep track of my information to see what is making the most change. Is it the medication? Is it the dietary changes? FYI, it was more of the dietary and lifestyle changes than it was the medication for me personally. So I say that to say the reason why that was effective is because it was collaborative. It wasn't just my medical team, my healthcare team telling me, this is what you're going to do. That's it. Non-compliant if you don't listen to us. It was, hey, we recommend this. You want to do that. How can we meet in the middle? So that's why it's really important when you're thinking about care, whether you're a patient, whether you're a client, whether it may be, because I'm using those terms because they're not necessarily interchangeable, but I'm using those terms because depending on where you are in the health field, one term may be more relevant to the other. But that's important. Is thinking about how can this be more of a collaborative process. And then the last thing is community. Community does offer you that practical help and support. And this is an example, not for me. Um, Someone in our community fell like really bad. She's an older woman and she slipped and fell outside. I live in Massachusetts. It can be very icy here. So she fell. One of the neighbors found her, was able to call an ambulance. However, she had to go to rehabilitation. And that particular family that normally supports her had to go on vacation. And they were like, hey, this vacation's already planned. Like, is there anyone else in the community that can support her? And multiple people stepped up and said, yes, we could take her from rehab. Yes, we could do laundry. Yes, we could. So I'm using that as an example of this is a person who has had a health scare. She's fallen, she's been injured, she had to get emergency surgery done, and she didn't have family. So she sought her community to be able to support her on a very practical level. Yes, some people would say she could have went through the process of like contacting the state and having that done too, not knocking that. But that may have been taking a lot longer of a process. And maybe she would have had to stay in rehab a little bit longer until like all the paperwork went through. And it was also the end of the year when she got injured. So like you can only imagine trying to get anything medical done at the end of the year is a nightmare. So all to say, the community stepped in to be able to support this woman go to rehab, be able to, get groceries, be able to do laundry, be able to do all these things that she physically was not able to do. So I share this to say, when we're thinking about non-negotiables for 2026, I really encourage y'all to number one, think about the context. Think about the different barriers that you uniquely have as an individual. Yes, how can you think through these, but it's not simply about overcoming the barriers. It's understanding that these barriers aren't going away, they exist. What are some alternative plans to be able to support me? Number two, care and ensure this must be a collaborative process. It's not simply a provider telling me what I need to do. It's us working together to create a plan that works for both of us. And three, community. How can you, as a member of the community, support other members of the community? How can you, as a member of the community, hey, Pen Pen, be able to reach out to other members of the community for support, right? So finding different ways that we can support one another, finding different ways that we can care for another, and finding different ways in which our context is different and we need to think more creatively about how we can achieve certain goals. So that's what I want to share with y'all. Just a quick little snap of thinking about non-negotiables when it comes to 2026. If there's any other non-negotiables that you think are important when it comes to supporting our health, feel free to drop them below in the comments and I'll look at you in our next video. And Penny will too. I was going to show y'all her, but there she is. Bye, y'all.